Is stress causing or is trauma causing stress in your life? Oh, that's a good question, isn't it? Let me ask it again. Is trauma causing stress in your life? So, we have these interactions with each other. We go into the world, we're in our home, and we have these relationships with other people, which means we have to communicate with them. We deal with different situations with them, right? So, what's happening when you're interacting with someone and you or the other person seems to be very heightened in their emotions? They everything seems to just switch into a highly emotional situation. Is it really about what's going on right there at the moment? Or could it be something that happened in the past? So, whether it's you or someone that you're interacting with and their emotions rise really high, they become angry, maybe agitated, frustrated, maybe it's not about what's happening right at the moment. Maybe it could be something from a traumatic event in the past. And this is something that we need to know. Why? Because we will react or respond differently if we understand what's going on. And often, what's going on isn't what is happening right at the present time. Often, what's happening in the present time triggers some emotions from a past event. So let's talk about this more. Hey, I'm Coach Pamsky. I am a certified master practitioner in neuroscience and emotional resilience. And I empower businesswomen and female leaders to get to the root cause of their stress, turn it into a strength, and attain emotional well being so that they can calm the chaos and thrive while alive. All right, let's dive into this because we're going to talk about not if you're the person who seems to overreact, get angry quickly, or you are the recipient of the person who overreacts or seemingly or becomes agitated very quickly, we're going to talk about what does that look like and what do you do, whether you're the person that's actually getting your emotions are getting high or you're the person who is the recipient of that. We'll talk about what you can do. So here's the first thing that we need to understand is your brain is linked to past pain. Okay? Your brain is an amazing machine, okay? And it links things to the past. We have what's called the amygdala, and it will link things to the past. And when it does that, it says, "Oh, this is very familiar." And it starts to, oh, what can we say? Ignite a part of your brain that signifies your nervous system that we need to fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Okay. So when this is going on, it can be why does it happen? Because there's a threat. There's a threat. Is there really a threat? Well, your brain doesn't really know the difference. It can be a perceived threat. So let's look at this. When you're having a conversation with someone, say you're with a loved one, a mate, and you guys are into this conversation and they say something and it just triggers you. And trigger is a good word because it's like this switch that flips. Something they say triggers you and all of a sudden you feel threatened. There is a threat and your nervous system all goes into this mode of I need to protect myself. And so It's thinking this is a lot like what happened back here. So maybe you had a traumatic event that happened to you, and whatever it was that your mate said or did, because sometimes it's not what they say, it's what they do, it triggers you, and your brain says, this is just like whatever happened in the past. And it automatically starts thinking, I need to get you ready, because that's what your nervous system does, is get you ready for fighting, or to flight, to freeze, to run, to fawn. And we can talk about those four in another time. But when this is happening to you, your brain doesn't know the difference. It's just reacting to this trigger. If you're the person who is in that state, it's and it is survival mode. I think it's extremely important that we understand that. It's not an excuse. I'm not saying it's an excuse. I want you to understand what is actually happening here. Because the more that you understand what's happening, the more that you can have grace and mercy for yourself and have tools to use to help you regulate your emotions. Or if you're the recipient, this information's important because you're able then to understand, oh, she's not out to get me, or he's not, this wasn't really about me. Or, wow, I didn't realize that's a trigger of hers. And when you know this, then you can approach things a little bit differently, and you can use tools to be able to regulate yourself when somebody else is in that heightened emotional state. This is good. This is really good because this is everyday stuff. We have to engage with people every day. And what we tend to do, if you're the person, well, even if you're the recipient or you're the person who ends up being the one that becomes very angry, agitated, one of the things you'll do is you'll avoid. You'll want to avoid these situations. So then what happens? No communication happens. There's a gap between you and that person, a wedge, and you won't communicate because you know that you get agitated. You know you get frustrated, and a lot of times we end up blaming the other person for it, when if we could pause. So this is a little bit of what we can do. If we can pause and really assess what's going on here. What is going on inside my body? Pay attention to what's going on inside your body. How are you reacting? Because you know that when you become triggered, when something from the past, a traumatic event gets triggered, your heart starts to race. You start to breathe quicker. Your blood pressure rises. You become very agitated because you see this happening, and a lot of times you want to stop it, but you don't know how. Or it happens so fast that your prefrontal cortex in your brain shuts down, which is your reasoning center. It shuts down and you can't reason what's going on here. So let's start with the person who's actually the one who's experiencing this, the one who gets triggered, the one who has the traumatic event or events from the past that keep getting triggered. Let's start with that person because I think that a lot of you are resonating with this. So, one of the first things, if you're the person who's experiencing this, the very first thing is that you need to regulate your emotions. You need to activate your parasympathetic nervous system. Okay. We'll talk about that some other time. But it's important for you to know that you need to be active in regulating yourself. Now, if you heard what I said, your brain can shut down. Your prefrontal cortex, your reasoning can shut down. So, you trying to reason this or reason with yourself is not going to be the first thing for you to do if your emotional state is high. It will not be the first thing. You can try, and you've probably tried in the past all these affirmations and finding asking yourself why, and it doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? Because your reasoning center is shut down and it can't make sense of all this. It's almost like talking to a drunk. So, what do you do instead? Well, the very first thing you need to do is pause. Pause. If you need to stop the conversation and go in the bathroom, then that's what you need to do. But you need to pause. Whatever's about to come out of your mouth, you just need to stop. Okay? Take that moment and assess, "Oh my goodness, I've been triggered." Or, "Wow, I'm I am so highly emotional right now. I need to stop." Because you know what happens. It gets way out of hand. We say things we don't mean, or we hurt other people because we're so angry. Okay, pause. The second thing you want to do is regulate your nervous system by breathing. Breathing in your nose by the count of 4, holding for 4, breathing out of your mouth on the count of 4, and then pausing for 4, and then doing it again. It's called box breathing, or there's other names for it. Why is this important? Because you have lack of oxygen going through your body. You have all these chemicals rushing through you, and your body needs oxygen, because one of the first things you do when you start to get highly emotional is you tighten up and you breathe shallow. And your brain needs that oxygen. It needs it. So if you do the box breathing, it starts to bring the oxygen up to your brain, which helps with all the chemicals that are shutting down your prefrontal cortex. Interesting, huh? Our bodies are incredible. Incredible. So once you do the breathing, and I would do it 3, 4, however many times you need to feel that blood pressure come down and your heart not beating so fast. Once you get to that point, then you can do some somatic techniques, which actually the box breathing is a somatic technique. But another one is maybe grounding yourself, sitting on a chair and feeling your feet on the floor, feeling your hands on your leg, still breathing, slow and deep breaths, but actually feel like ground yourself. Grounding is so important. Sometimes people will keep a rock in their pocket or a cross or something that they can stick their hand in their pocket and they can feel it. They'll rub their fingers over it and they will feel, for a rock, they'll feel all the little indents in it. Why? Because it helps ground them. What does grounding mean? It brings you, remember I said, your brain can think that you are back in that traumatic event. And it may be an event that you don't consciously remember, but your body and your brain does. And or your nervous system, I should say your nervous system and your body does. So you can, when you're rubbing that rock, what it's doing is, and I often tell my clients this, tell yourself this is now, that was then. Even if you don't know what then is exactly, this is now, that was then. Because it helps you to consciously come back to the present moment, regulate your emotions, get your body calmed down. And once your body's calmed down, you can actually start thinking. You'll feel it's like that switch, you will actually start to recognize that now you can start making sense of things. Things like, that person is not really your enemy, and that person really didn't mean to hurt me, and it really wasn't about them. It was about what's back there. So when you're able to identify some of the underlining emotions that you're feeling, because the thing is that we run from emotions. We try to avoid them. We don't like them. And in fact, emotions are just messengers. They are neutral. Not one emotion is good or bad. It's how we perceive that emotion and how we identify with it, but they're actually neutral. And they're messages to tell us, hey, something is going on here. Now, you may feel that a trigger is bad. It's not. I know it feels like it is because everything that happens as you're going through feeling this way, but it is, emotions and triggers are really not bad. Again, the same thing with triggers. They're messages. They're to tell us, hey, there's something that needs to be worked on here. If you want to be a person that walks in freedom, that feels good, that has peace, then you have to stop ignoring your emotions and avoiding them. And I get it. They can be overwhelming. But if you start to work on them a little bit at a time, and if you want help with that, reach out to me. Because I'm telling you, I was an emotional wreck from all the trauma I experienced and all the things that was said to me. It was ingrained in me, and I was getting triggered left and right, and I was a basket case. I was not a nice person. I got angry a lot in my younger years because I didn't understand what was happening to me. I didn't understand about triggers. I didn't understand about our emotional state getting high. Does this cause stress? Absolutely. Sometimes we don't recognize some of this as a trigger response to trauma. We just see that we're getting stressed out. And so it's important to be able to look at, okay, so what's really what's really going on with me? And what do I do about it? I love Psalms 147:3 because it says, Psalm 147:3 says, He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. Sometimes we just need to know that in that time of losing it, in that time of wanting to treat people kindly and nice, but all of a sudden we're hitting that state of feels like no return. We can. Now let's go to the person who is the recipient of this, because I think this is important. We don't always know what do we do about this? How do we handle this? Well, the first thing I want to say is if you're living with someone, working with someone, or dealing with someone who seems to be highly emotional, gets into these maybe passive aggressive, because this is notorious for people who are passive aggressive, and there's reasons for that. If you're dealing with someone like that, the very first thing I'm going to tell you is, and this is extremely hard, but don't take it personal. Oh, right? Don't take it well, how do I not take it personal when they're standing there yelling at me and getting all emotional on me? Why do they have to be so sensitive? Oh, wait a minute. Let me tell you, and I tell my clients this all the time. I remind them of this all the time. You do not have to allow other people's emotions to affect you. That's hard, isn't it? But it's true. You do not have to allow other people's emotions to affect you. So if you tell yourself, I am not going to take this personal. Now, that doesn't mean that you negate things that you are responsible for, because often what happens is this. you're having a conversation or someone's having a conversation with you. They bring up the fact that you didn't do the dishes or you didn't take the garbage out or you left your socks and your clothes out on the floor again or whatever. Those are usually the minor things that seem like really big things, right? They're expressing that to you, but in the midst of that, maybe something you said or did or didn't do triggered them. And now they're at the heightened state of emotion. Well, are you responsible for doing the dishes? Well, if it's your turn or it's, a lot of times in families, everyone has their designated chore to do. If you were the one that was supposed to do the dishes, then yes, you are responsible for that. So I'm not saying don't be responsible. What I am saying is when somebody is in that heightened state, don't take it personal because it could be a trigger. It could be that there's trauma in their past and they just got triggered and it's not necessarily your fault that they're triggered. So don't take it personal. You have to regulate your own nervous system because isn't it true that when someone is getting louder and louder, what happens to you? Well, it depends on who you are. Some people, they shrink in and become very small, almost in that fetal position because it may trigger them. Some people will just start lashing out themselves. Well, who do you think you are? And lashing out. Here's the thing. You need to pause then. If somebody is heightened in their emotions, you can say, "Hey, time out. I think that we need to pause here. This is getting out of hand. Now, I will tell you, if you wait too long, it's gonna be really hard to do that for you and for the other person. So, you have to regulate, okay, what's the place on the thermometer that we need to do this, that we need to say, "Look, we need to take a pause." And when you're in your right mind, both of you. It's a calm time together. Maybe you guys need to talk about this. Hey, we often get into these conversations that get heated. Is there something, a sign that we can give each other? And did you notice I did this? You can have a sign that you signify each other. That it signifies that we need to stop now. We need to stop now because it's just going to get ugly. And you both pause. But you need a pause because you need to be able to regulate your own emotions, your own nervous system. Otherwise, you're just going to fire back and you're going to say things that's going to hurt them. So give yourself space. If you need space, I suggest you take space so that you can deal with yourself. You're also offering safety. You're offering, "Okay, you know what? I love you," and this is what I would say, "I love you, and I wanna talk about this, but I think right now we're both not in a good place, so let's just stop, and we'll come back and talk about this." So important to say, you're gonna come back, and you're gonna talk about this. And then you can encourage, them by telling them you love them. You can both go to a coach or a counselor or a therapist or someone who can help you be able to regulate your emotions and talk about maybe sort through some of this, be able to find out, okay, what was the trigger? Because often you heard me say it, this person over here gets triggered. It could be, and you say, well, what causes a trigger? It can be a smell, it can be a sound, it can be a certain motion, it can be a certain word, attitude, noise. It can be anything. It just depends on what throws them back into that traumatic event. But here's what can happen is the first person gets triggered, their emotions start to get high, and they start reacting because that's what we do when we're not paying attention and conscious about what's going on here. That person then often triggers this person. And then this person's nervous system is unregulated and emotions are high, and then they start reacting, and so now you have two people who are just reacting to each other, and instead we want to respond. And so it is up to you then to go do the box breathing and ground yourself. There are things you can do. You can go lay by a wall and put your feet up on the wall. And it's amazing how much blood will go back to your brain. And it just gives you time to regulate yourself. So once, we do this, we find that there's a whole lot more peace in it. Now, do those triggers need to be worked on? They do. Whatever is causing that trigger, you do need to have someone help you look at, okay, what is causing this and what needs to happen so that the trigger isn't so strong. Sometimes triggers never go away, but they can get less and less and less. And the time that you're triggered can become less and less and less. A lot of times, the trigger can be taken care of because there's just emotions and things that are wrapped up in it that causes these triggers to happen. So, can trauma cause stress? Absolutely. And a lot of time, people don't realize that it's actually trauma that's causing the stress. So, one of the things that I want you to think about as we close on this, and we can talk about some of the other things like the fight, flight, freeze, and fawning, because I know that is something a response, a trauma response, a survival mode for many people. But what I want you to think about is that not everything that weighs you down is yours to carry. Think about that. Not everything that weighs you down is yours to carry. And yet, you've been carrying it around for a long time, and it's a heavy, heavy load. Heavy load. You see this QR code. You can use your phone and you can scan that QR code, and it will take you to a 6 or 7 question survey, call it what you want, but it will help you identify what's holding you back. What obstacle is getting in your way and holding you back from thriving while alive, from having that peace that you want? What obstacle is in your way? And once you take it, it will tell you what obstacle or obstacles are in your way. And then it will start sending you some solutions, some things that you can do to help you out. So make sure that you scan that QR code. And if you want help with being able to look at what is causing my heightened emotional state, or what is triggering me, or you already know what's triggering you and you want help, reach out to me, send a message, get a hold of me, and we'll talk. We'll talk. Alrighty. I hope that this helped you out, and I am so grateful for you for watching this video, watching this live, and I want you to be able to have the life that you deserve to have. To be able to look at because most of the time when this stuff goes on, we're not real proud of ourselves. And if you don't like yourself already, and then you react in these ways, wow, we can be tough on ourselves, can't we? And I want you to be able to receive and have the life that's meant for you. Why? Because it's time to thrive while alive. Until next time.